Hello, you're watching TVP World Talks. I'm Jonasz Lewiński. Moldova's democracy is about to face the most critical test yet, with reports of Moscow funneling millions of dollars to tip the upcoming parliamentary vote in their favor. But President Maya Sandu and her political camp are not standing idle, with a series of police raids against alleged pro-Russian groups resulting in multiple arrests. Can the democratic forces in Moldova survive this crucible and secure the nation's path to the European Union? Joining us now is Oana Popescu, director at the Global Focus Center. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Hi, good to be with you again.
Good to see you again as well. So first question is, do you think that the fact that the government is fighting back against Russian disinformation with these raids, is this a good thing? Because we often see many countries being much more restrained. In Moldova's case, they are not holding back. They know what danger they are facing and they are responding accordingly, right?
I think the Republic of Moldova acknowledges that they don't have a choice. And frankly speaking, that is the case for all countries that are in some shape or form under various forms of Russian hybrid attack. And that is not necessarily something new. I remember around 2016, 2017, when the think tank that I lead, the Global Focus Center, did an analysis of resilience to hybrid warfare in regional countries. Georgia at the time was featuring very well, precisely because forced by the 2008 Russian incursion, they had identified their enemy with precision. So they were able to devise strategic steps to counter that. They were able to set in place all the institutional mechanisms necessary. And that's what's happening in Moldova as well. Unless you identify the challenge that you're dealing with, you will not be able to put together the institutional machinery needed, and you won't be able to gather the social support needed to fight back. And I think Moldova has been quite courageous, because this is a country with very few resources, very little strategic depth. It's a country that has neutrality enshrined in its constitution, so it's not easy to stand up to a military giant like Russia. But given that they have been attacked in every possible way through disinformation, manipulation, interference, and so on and so forth, the only choice was to actually resist and to highlight for the population the kind of challenge that they're dealing with, the predictive scenarios that lie in wait. And that's something that Chisinau has done quite intelligently. And I think following these elections, they will be a study case for all of us as to how you can move from an adaptive posture to one that is actually trying to take the upper hand. They have stopped responding to Russia's challenges only, and they have developed, as I was saying, predictive scenarios. They tried to anticipate the Russian moves so that they would be prepared with the necessary reaction in place. And I think that's what we're seeing these days.
So let's talk about the toolbox that Russia has been using, because there are many challenges to respond to. Let's begin with bribery, because Russia has figured out, okay, so if there is a nation of 2.4 million people, we can try to bribe some of them to vote for us. And they're apparently funneling these funds through cryptocurrencies lately.
Absolutely. That's actually a potentially cost-efficient way of doing things for Russia, because with a small population, you can actually hope to just simply buy the number of votes that you need, not to necessarily make sure that your proxies win the election. That doesn't look likely at this point, but to make sure, and that is what Russia is playing at, to make sure that you end up with a fragmented coalition, that the Action and Solidarity Party cannot form the government by themselves, that they don't have a comfortable majority, so they need a partner, and then they're gonna end up with a dysfunctional government, perhaps one that's going to require the organization of early elections sometime, let's say, in the space of 1 year and a half. It's been seen before. So Russia's game is to try and turn around enough votes so that they can have a hung parliament that's unable to actually deliver on EU reforms, on good governance, and then the social tide and the political tide might slowly turn in the favor of the pro-Russian forces. So that is why they have not abandoned the idea of trying to buy votes piece by piece, despite the fact that following the same kind of tactics in 2024, now the Republic of Moldova is prosecuting more than 1,000 cases, and they are using the justice system as they should to go after people who are committing crimes. But it's a risk that Moscow is willing to take, and Moscow's proxies, especially the Ilan Shore network, the network of influence of the fugitive oligarch. But apart from that, it's that they have diversified. It's no longer only vote buying and the use of cryptocurrency to try and hide the bribery better. It's also, and that's an element of novelty apart from social media, especially on Telegram, TikTok, less transparent platforms, but it's also the creation of fake pro-EU parties that pretend to have a moderate program that's in line with Moldova's European commitments, but in fact, actually pander to the Kremlin's agenda in ways that are less manifest. But if you look at the essence of their policies and their proposals, you will see that they actually oppose Moldova's EU path. So a whole array of older or newer methods, and I think Russia is basically willing to throw everything it has at its disposal at this point to not lose Moldova.
So from what you're saying, it's not just the traditional narratives that Russia has been, feeding to its supporters, like joining the EU will drag Moldova into the war, or Moldova will be subsumed into the decadent West, into European superstate. From what you're saying, it's also these kind of matryoshka narratives, like a Russian nesting doll. You take one thing, but within that, there is something completely different. Do you think that this is an even greater danger? Because moderate voters might actually be swayed by sound economic arguments, at least in theory, but later on it will turn out that, okay, what we voted for wasn't really what we got.
I think so, because you still have 40% of people who are undecided yet. There's little time before the elections, and the great numbers of people who are still undecided actually testify to the fact that you can still sway an important number of votes in one way or another. And it also testifies to the fact that people aren't really won over by either the government narrative or the opposition, pro-Russian or pro-European. In Moldova, as I was saying earlier, one of Europe's poorest countries, it is still pensions and inflation and prices and jobs that determines which way people vote. And that is something that's been difficult to deliver, although the government has been doing a lot of EU-aligned reforms. But as we all know, the EU accession process doesn't always deliver palpable results at the grassroots level in the first phase, especially without even opening the first cluster. So people, it's hard to explain to people how EU accession will serve their interests in very concrete and immediate ways. So that is why, since the population is still sitting on the fence, it's confused, it's disengaged. It's exactly what Russia was after. Try to promote apathy in Moldova, political disengagement, so that it would have a smaller critical mass of votes to turn around. And this is a rather toxic environment. And I think the main challenge right now is, on the one hand, the diversity and the number of ways in which Russia attacks Moldova, hoping the government will simply not be able to deal with all of them. And the other one, I think, is the fact that if things still go well for the current pro-democratic forces, if the vote result seems to be moving in the European direction, Russia is willing to use anything from violent protests to perhaps some sort of kinetic operation to make sure that even so, it doesn't, Moldova doesn't escape its sphere of influence.
Oana Popescu was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight.
Thank you.
And I'm Milan Shelevinsky. You're watching TVP World. Please do stay with us.